Well, we'll tell you who they are as they go on stage. First to go is Daria. This is Daria Julkowska. She's the coordinator of the European Joint Programme for Rare Diseases, and she works at INSERM in Paris. And do you need a hand?
No.
I think you need to put that something. Are you going
No, because we don't have, enough of micros for everybody, so we are
to
going
pass it around.
yeah.
Okay. There's another one here. Can they use this? No, you need it. Okay. Oh, you do the online. Please, Milan Macek from Prague, our gracious host, who's coordinating a lot of rare disease efforts and in the Czech Republic and the ERN centers. Second one. Put this here. Next on stage, Simona Bellagambi from Eurordis. We've heard from Eurordis today, and this has no water. And you're going to give that perspective. Thank you. And here's Tim. Tim, you've all seen Timothy Yu from Boston Children's Hospital and Harvard, working on new treatments, diagnosis for rare diseases. And here from the European Commission, please, Christina Kyriakopoulou, sorry, I'll say that better. Christina Kyriakopoulou from the European Commission, and you've been graciously looking after Solve-RD from the Commission end. And then Olaf Riess, the coordinator of Solve-RD, and also a full professor, as they say, at the University of Tübingen. So welcome. So 6 of you. We're not exactly. We don't have a lot of time. So you've been asked to summarize your thoughts in a first statement. What has to change? What will change for RD diagnosis and therapy? I'm going to ask you, all of you, to do this in 2 minutes. So please try and do that. And Olaf, since you spent 10 minutes before the break, I'll give you 1 minute. There you go. So, hold the microphone.
So where do we move? What would be bottlenecks? And so what would be our concern? My concern would be that across Europe, whole genome and whole exome sequencing enters the healthcare system. I think everywhere that's a fact, and even if we have differences in the different countries. However, the data we produce will be in data silos. So that is my concern. So once the diagnostic data, they don't have research consent. Also the cases we solved, we learned from Timothy how important it would be to have all these data in worldwide registries. And for the ones we didn't solve, you know, having these novel omics technologies on it. So the challenge will be to get clinical and research data accessible. So that's
get everything together.
Get everything together
so people can access it.
Accessible and to the fair principle.
So this is exactly what Solve-RD has been doing. So that's what you want on a bigger scale.
Yes, but so the concern is that the diagnostic data, I mean, all our data have been generated with research agreement from the patients.
Yes.
And I think we generate way more data on the diagnostic level without having research consent.
So you want to propose to
Yes.
promote that?
Yes.
Have this kind of consent. Thank you very much. That was your minute. And now it's Christina.
You have to be patient with me. I'm a bit slow in the mornings. So I wanted, first of all, I take a moment to congratulate and from the European Union perspective about the amazing achievements of this project. Together, all of you, Solve-RD, researchers, patients, healthcare professionals, and this is great achievement, and we will promote, and we have been promoting as much as possible to all the levels. Now, what I want to mention, I think, for the future, diagnostics. First of all, we need to take the results that have been produced in this network and learn from the European experience and transfer it to the national level. So we have more than 30 million people living with a rare disease in Europe. So taking the new diagnostic tools and discoveries to a larger population and to increase the equity and the equity approach for all our patients. Another reflection is, of course, how we bring the whole exome sequencing and whole genome sequencing closer to the clinic. And this is very important also to bring the genomic data to enrich the patient registries, what's really at the real world setting, and also to be able to follow the discoveries that have been produced in Solve-RD, maybe not all the discoveries of single point mutations, but we have to find, for example, a platform to prioritize and to validate the functionality. And another thing which I would think it will be important is to move from a single diagnosis, single disease, to a group of disease. So collectively bring the knowledge that you have started to do in Solve-RD, what we know from the literature, from the genes, but also it will be very important to overlay in signaling pathways this single nucleotide mutation. So I think a combinatorial control of what is the strength of a combination of SNPs would be important, because each SNP on its own perhaps doesn't contribute to the phenotype, but synergistically from the scientific perspective, it will be important to see it as a fingerprint of SNPs that could explain some pathology. And for the whole genome sequencing, I think very important is to identify new splice variants, because this will give us novel genes and actionable genes or forms to go to the treatment.
Thank you. I think that was a perfect introduction and handover to Tim. But I'm going to say, to try and summarize what you said, I think what you said was very complementary to what Olaf said, because I think what Solve-RD has done has accumulated and collected and integrated a lot of data from many, many different centers and countries. And what you're now saying is that integrated data, that integrated knowledge now needs to go back to the people. And to the countries. And I will remark, and it was on Alex's slide, but it was not very clear, that of course, like most European projects, it was heavily biased towards the developed countries that already have exome sequencing. And we need to really, if we want to go back to the people, I like this phrase, go back to the people, let's do that. But do that for, at least for all of Europe. So now for Tim.
In my time in human genetics, I feel like I've seen a few different waves of progress. Each wave comes when two different specialties meet together and begin having conversations at the same together, bringing two disciplines that previously didn't know how to speak the language to a harmonized approach to a problem. The first wave was in the late 2000s with bioinformaticians meeting up with molecular biologists to understand how to interpret variants at scale. The next was to bring that expertise to human geneticists, to bring it beyond an abstract problem to solve mouse diseases to human diseases. And this next phase that you are all involved in is extending that to clinicians. And so I think that continued pressure to move this from the bench into the clinic is critical. I love the idea expressed in the summary of the tree tabulome and distilling the findings into clinically useful and management relevant instruction points for the clinicians involved. I obviously see that the work that we described in interventional genomics as being one of the more unique motivators for that, and putting that out there, changing the definition of what actionable really means. I think that's a big focus for how you can extend what you've already built here.
Well, thanks for that. And when you say there have been waves and then you start in the late 2000s, I think that betrays your age, but maybe there were waves before, but I do entirely agree with your assessment. Please, Simona.
Yes, just allow me a few minutes to underline how timely is this closing meeting of this successful project, because we'll be celebrating the Undiagnosed Day in the coming days, so the end of 29th or 28th of April. And it is important because giving visibility to this part of the people living with a rare condition, ultra rare or undiagnosed condition, it is of the utmost importance, as it is our participation and engagement in this project. It has been proven also in Solve-RD how patients can drive research, can give their contribution, and how much they want to be engaged. Obviously, this means that we want to have a peer role, being patient, so we know who we are, but we have our story. And I think also the natural history of diseases plays an important role in research. And so as we are pushing to have a further involvement, engagement, and continuation of project when a project ends, because this is our problem. We saw the percentage of still undiagnosed people, and the end of project shouldn't mean that we stop there, because we still live with a non-diagnosed or diagnosed condition. We want to contribute, and we want further engagement beyond the end of project, allowing, as we heard today, a broader, larger, and collection of data, which is key for the solution, reanalysis and solution of diagnosis cases, which are not cases, are people living with a rare disease. So what I see for the future, a broader, heavier engagement beyond the project, and an engagement for a broader and very clear contribution at all level of data, of collection of data, not working on silos, because it's still present, even though we are stating that we are not, and Solve-RD has proven how important it is, the collaboration. We must engage even more and commit ourselves in this sense.
Thank you, Simona. And I think, thank you for emphasizing this sort of continuum from diagnosis. We've all been very focused on diagnosis, especially people my age, because diagnosis was, almost impossible for many years. And now we know why, because it's a really difficult problem. But the new technologies are solving it. But then, of course, you want this continuum of diagnosis and care. And I think your point of involving patients, I think, is especially relevant there. We've seen trials that were designed by doctors that had endpoints that had no relevance to what the patients, need. So at least there, we should talk. Milan, please.
Well, I guess the future is already now, and we should capitalize on an incredible momentum which was gathered during the last year's conference in October, which we organized, which was aiming towards a comprehensive healthcare framework for rare diseases within the next decade. And this resulting call for action was supported by, and it's amazing, by 21 out of the 27 member states, representing 82% of the EU general population, and within which, in fact, genomic diagnostics, as you said, Han and Olaf, stands at the very beginning, and it's crucial to ensure efficient healthcare pathways and care pathways for patients with rare diseases, but not only with that. And Solve-RD was specifically listed there, and Olaf eloquently spoke about Solve-RD 2.0, and this is what we hope to have within the next decade. And I want to stress, we really need to liaise much more closely with the ERNs, which offer a unique backbone, although underfunded. We can talk about it later on. And we also have to stress, together with professional international societies, national human genetic societies, that genome diagnostics, and I don't want to go into specific, should be reimbursed within EU healthcare systems. And this is one of the major bottlenecks we have at the moment, but not only the analytical part, but also the bioinformatics part, where we struggle even more than with the sort of wet lab approaches. And finally, there's a sort of an elephant in the room, which is the IVDR, the in vitro diagnostics regulation, which can really, I would say, challenge and hinder all the sort of, I would say, artisan genetics, which we still do and carry out within the context of rare diseases. And again, I want to point to the talk of Alex Heusken. You know, we are still at the very beginning, and we need to take this into account. So just to sum it up, there's a momentum. Member states want that. We hope that the Commission, although there are some problems, will jump on board, and that we will have equitable access to genomic diagnostics at the beginning of healthcare pathways for rare diseases.
Well, thank you for that, Milan, and for stressing equitable access. And when you say equitable, you do mean across all of Europe, I suppose. The other thing you mentioned that I found, motivating is the ERNs. And the ERNs were, by design, were an integral part of this project, even though and Home thought that the ERNs hadn't actually started their activity when we submitted Solve-RD. So when we were writing it, we were hoping they would work. And I think they have, if I may use the term, grown up a bit. Right. The ERNs, I think they've become much more professional. They were always a collection of professionals, but I think they've now become more like a unit of professional, or a professional unit, if you will. Is that your perspective on the ERNs? Do you think they have come a long way?
Well, I mean, they did a great job. All of the ERNs with very limited funding. It's based on the, I would say, dedication of a generation of the sort of founders and European founders for care, diagnostics, and research in rare diseases. But now we really need to build it on a sustainable financial infrastructure, both nationally and internationally, to make them sustainable and make them grow, because you just cannot live on enthusiasm and goodwill.
Well, I think you're one of the people who show that you can actually live on enthusiasm. But thank you very much, Daria.
But not for long.
Not for long. Okay.
Yes.
We wish you good health. Daria.
I fully agree, and I would like actually to thank all of you, because I'm a, let's say, a big fan also of the let's say the overall rare diseases community, where I think that the commitment is goes beyond any kind of borders that we can imagine. But what I just wanted to remind, and I think and of course I will be happy to expand on the rare diseases partnership and what it can bring, but just to remind one thing, that is the ERDOC goal, as well as the Rare 2030, right? When we are saying that every patient should be diagnosed within 6 months of coming to medical attention. And so I see two things there. I mean, first, coming to 6 months within coming to medical attention if the disease is known. And we see that even if the disease is known, we still struggle, right, to have a faster diagnosis. And in Europe, it's still about 4 years. So it's definitely too long. And then we have all the undiagnosed cases. And so from my perspective, what is extremely important, and we are still not yet there, is really this kind of seamless integration between the research pipeline and the healthcare pipeline. And this is also something which is part of the ERDOC goals. And so for me, what was mentioned, that the fact that we still struggle with the access of the data and how we can integrate those two parts in relation to the data, but also in relation to bridging the preclinical research, and this was also mentioned by Tim, the preclinical research and the clinical one, how we can make sure that the richness of the community that we have at European, at international level with the preclinical modeling, and this was also something that the Solve-RD and the Canadian colleagues also shown that this is possible, how this knowledge can be brought to the service of the clinics, but also how we can make sure that the patients that are being let's say, identified can integrate the research pipeline. So these are, I would say, main concerns at this stage for me. I hope that the Rare Disease Partnership can help in that, but it is true, and what Milan just said is that if we do not have the real integration between the national capacities and what we can do at the European scale or international scale. This is something that is not going to work. So I hope that the work that we have started now and now really ongoing and must be submitted for September for the Rare Disease Partnership will be one of the main milestones to overcome this remaining bottleneck.
Well, thank you for that. And I think what you said it very eloquently, that whenever people organize something, they organize the thing that's there already. So it's a national thing, or it's a research thing, or it's a healthcare thing. And that happens at all levels, national. It happens at the European level, where there's research programs and there's healthcare programs. It happens at any level. And then this kind of thing we're doing here for rare diseases actually cuts across all the levels. So that's why, you know, IVDR was mentioned, and data protection and all of that. And by definition, and I'd like your opinion, by definition, I think we need these projects to overcome these hurdles that were not intentional. Nobody put the hurdle there because they thought, let's make a hurdle so that the rare disease patients can no longer have access. But the hurdles are there because people are trying to organize things in a sensible way. But then this kind of thing, this kind of need from the rare disease community actually needs things that go across all these different fields. And therefore you really need a project. Is that how am I interpreting you correctly, or am I overstating?
No, that's definitely that.
Thank you. Okay, so what we said was we would now have a second and a third round about hurdles and solutions. Again, I think, and then we'll take it to you for the last half hour. So for the next 10 minutes, we're going to ask the panel to tell us about, perhaps just I don't think we want too many hurdles. So why don't we just do, you know, we go home and very depressing. So if you have one, you can mention one hurdle, each. So that would be 6 hurdles. But you can only mention a hurdle if you have something resembling a solution or an approach. Olaf.
I'm sorry.
Sorry. Yeah. So it's a statement, what we all made. Statement is nobody should be left behind. We discussed the patient side. We also have to discuss the country side. So it's not fair that someone lives in one country, doesn't get the diagnosis. Then
I said one hurdle.
That's one hurdle.
One
hurdle, nobody should be left behind.
What is the hurdle?
Nobody should be left behind is a hurdle. And you ask for potential solutions.
Yes.
Third one is hurdle technology. I think the countries are responsible. EU cannot fund all the technologies. And the fourth one is experts. And that's, again, where we are here as a network also, we discussed it, Daria,
Again,
training other people.
Again,
That's it.
How is this one hurdle and what is the solution?
I said this, we have too few experts across all the countries, and we as a network are here also to train these people. I think in the future, Solve-RD 2.0, we have to make a major statement, also train experts across Europe.
See, I'm being slow. So what you're saying is the expertise is different across Europe, so we need to share it. And in sharing it, we need also to educate and train the next generation locally, so they don't need the experts, or they become the experts.
Yes.
Thank you. Christina.
Because of the intrinsic link between research
on
on rare diseases and healthcare, and that we have seen directly from the results of Solve-RD, what we are doing as policymakers, it's to increase the impact of research we fund, increase the impact, transfer faster the results of research to the benefits of the patients. And that, so one of the solutions, it is to coordinate with the ministries, with colleagues at the member states, and with the leadership of colleagues from different countries for the partnership. And that will be to create an ecosystem to be able to transfer the research results to the benefits, such as, for example, the diagnostic benefits that we have seen produced here, for example.
So again, I think that was fantastically interesting, and it's very much in sync with what Tim was saying and will say. So this is sort of this idea that we need to take things forward, even if they haven't been done before. We need to take them forward to benefit the patients and the community. You talked about the leadership. You mentioned the word. So do you think there is, within the European Commission, that this is an idea that is sort of already there, or do we need to convince the leadership that this is something that they need to promote?
So I'm talking from the research and innovation perspective.
Yes.
It's very much interlinked. At least the European Union, together with the member states, because the European Union is the member states.
We know.
So, and the political vision that they put all together as a union, we have been supporting tremendously the research on rare diseases. And I think here I have to thank also the patient communities, because they have fought for the last 20 years to bring the political visibility at the European Union level, at the national level, and make it a public health priority, the rare diseases. So it is the appreciation is great. So leadership, it is going together at the European Union with the member states, because we need to bring it at the policy level and the decision policy makers at the countries. So I think also another hurdle is to increase awareness. It might be very simple, but I can copy one nice quote from one colleague from the EGPRD: we don't know what we don't know. So this means that the more you know, even solutions that can be just a knowledge access, as you do here, open knowledge access, open policies, it can trigger small changes that can change the system. I mean, because we start from building the small pieces together to grow big. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you for highlighting the role that the patients and the patient organizations have played in putting this on the agenda. I think that is, and still, there is still a continued need for that. I think we're not there yet. Tim, please.
Perhaps what I'd like to put on the agenda is that,
Put it a little closer.
as a scientist and a physician, I've grown, many of us, all of us have grown up in a system where when it comes to therapeutics, we've had the luxury of bringing things to a certain level of proof of concept. We describe the disease, we characterize the genetic cause, the molecular basis, and then we can reach it over to industry for them to take it from there. And I
do a double-blind trial.
A double-blinded trial, which will be miraculously financed by various industry mechanisms. And this is the societally approved and scientifically approved, professionally approved way to go. But I think we're going to have to break out of that, because we are in a bit of a trap, aren't we? For rare diseases, we've set up a system which discriminates on the basis of prevalence. And if we are going to actually solve rare disease, then we'll have to find a new system. And we'll have to create space for that new system, which may entail different financing models. It may entail different risks. It may entail a different structure of different relationships between investigators and companies. So that's what I'd like to put on the agenda. I would say that it's a daunting challenge, but to come back to the point about patience and engagement, I think that when you have the chance to try to think about a new system, it's the right time to bring in the families, to ask them, what do you think it should look like?
And when you say a new system, you also mean a new regulatory system, I suppose. It is not completely different from the old system, but there is something specific to rare disease. Is that correct?
That's correct. One disease, one drug, one approval may not be sufficient. Well, what should replace it? Let's have that discussion and figure out what the risks of that new system might be, and figure out if we are ready to embrace them.
Thank you.
Wow. Thank you for mentioning role and our activity.
Also the microphone.
And I thought,
Oh, you have?
oh,
Yeah.
I've got one. Yeah.
It
It works better. Okay, thank you. And obviously, I fully agree with you, and I don't want to repeat it. So I will focus on other challenges. I wouldn't say hurdles, because we have to find a solution. And so there were mentioned the ethical aspects of research, or engagement of patients in research, and new technologies, new approach bring along ethical challenges. But we have to find a solution, obviously. And I don't like the sentence patient at the center, but this case is the person at the center. So the ethical issues maybe relate to what? Data property, data ownership, person decisions on the future, on what we want to know and how we want to know. And, the time before we receive an answer. There are so many aspects related to the ethical issues that cannot be used as excuses not to advance research, because this is what we want.
This is what you want. When you say they cannot be used, ethical concerns cannot be used to hold back research. Does that imply that today, sometimes, ethical concerns do actually hold back research from a patient perspective? Because that's what I hear.
Patient perspective.
Organizations, they say you're making things too complicated, and we're not getting anywhere. Is that what?
Yes, this is what I meant. I mean, obviously, we want ethical issues are there. They have to be solved because we want answer. We want to have diagnosis, and while searching, we might find something unexpected.
Yes.
And we have to find a solution and how we can address these incidental findings or whatever they are, and how to communicate. And I think this needs a reflection and common reflection involving patients and families. We are,
Can I try and put that together and see what you think? So what I think you're saying, and I think Tim said something a bit similar in his talk, is that when you do something completely new, a new therapy that has only been tested in one animal species and so on and so forth, that means you take a risk. What I think you're saying is that's our risk. It's the patient's risk. So we want the patients to be able to say, this is the risk we'll accept or not accept. And you're saying, as much as we need, and you've also said that, as much as we need professional ethics reflection, the decision at the end of the day should be with
Yes.
the patient. That's what you're saying.
Yes,
Thank you.
perfectly wrapped up.
There you go. Milan.
Well, I mean, I just refer to what Olaf said and what the patients say, that nobody should be left behind, which is a commendable goal, and it's all clear. But what I see, being in the rare disease sphere for quite some while, that there's like an emerging threat, which can then become a hurdle in a way that we need to be realistic and transparent. We all talk about, therapies and all these excitements it makes the press and sexy papers in Nature, Cell, and so on, and wherever. But I mean, we still need to realize that the less frequent that the disease is, the less options there are for them. And we need to really be transparent. We need to talk about therapies, but we still should not forget, and it wasn't mentioned this meeting at all, we should still remember that provision of, I would say, a customized therapeutic choice for these, reproductive choices for these families is crucial and should not be forgotten and should be part of the portfolio, especially for those where there are no therapies, where the disease is debilitating, chronic, progressive, and so on. And what I see as a major threat and maybe becoming a hurdle is that given the scarcity of resources and given the lack of financing the ERNs, that there can be like a several tier, I would say, groups of rare diseases in Europe. Those, for instance, on the top, which have quote unquote everything, like cystic fibrosis or neuromuscular. And then the more you go down, the more sort of unmet needs there are. So we should be really, my plea is to be honest, transparent, and just say, look, you know, we are all doing our best, but there still are technologies and approaches which can assure that you have a healthy child. And just finally, I remember, Han, when we were the European Society, we had a long discussion with the Eurogentes one. In fact, what is the role of genetics? And remember how many definitions there are. And one of them, which then in the end popped up or bubbled up to the top, was that, you know, we should assure healthy kids in the family, and we should not forget that this is also one of our main roles.
Thank you. That was very clear. Daria?
So I thought actually that I'm not going to speak about any hurdles because everything is going to be said, but actually I found 2 extra ones. So,
2 hurdles. Well, you're the last, so you can do 2.
two things that make me think about how important also, some things that we are missing and that we need to follow up on this is that, and sometimes when I hear, for example, what Tim was saying and then your presentation, sometimes I really have impression that we are living in 2 parallel worlds in US and in Europe. And for me, for example, the involvement of the regulators, the HTA approval and so on is something which is extremely important. And I'm kind of jealous that FDA involves in the activities like co-financing, for example, of the critical path institutes, where together the regulators, the research community, and the companies actually are coming together, and they are exploiting together the possibility of reuse of data for the identification of the biomarkers, of the new diagnostic tools, of the new endpoints and other things that are so useful for the rare diseases community. So I think that in Europe, it would be really wonderful if we can get, I'm not saying that the EMA is not supportive, it is, but it is true that more direct involvement would be helpful. And this is, of course, the same also with the national regulatory bodies and the health technology assessment bodies. And the second,
Wait. I think that was your first hurdle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's just reflect on that for a second. So I've had conversations with many people, including Tim and Holm. I think on this topic of regulation, I'm just going to ask them because it's what they said. My sense was that, I think, Tim, you said that, I hesitate to say this, that, in the ideal world, things are perfectly regulated. In the practical world, sometimes if things are not regulated, that's actually better than have them regulated in an imperfect way, saying perhaps sometimes you should perhaps even wait a bit with regulating everything. That was not well put, but Tim, is that something? It was not a quote. I know that was not a quote, but it was, so it kind of came up in a conversation we had.
It did, and I had threatened to Holm and others that at some point, perhaps I should move to Europe to continue some of this work, because there are many advantages of working here as well. But I think that the point is well taken, that there's a proper amount of structure at the right time, which is helpful. And there's no simple, this way is better, this way is not better. It's at any given point in time. And I think that having the necessary freedom to explore a few creative solutions and to figure out this new equation is very helpful at this time. And I think that finding regulatory environments that permit careful experimentation of those systems is helpful, will prove helpful to the field. But it's not in all, it's always better on this side or that side of the Atlantic, a simple answer like that.
Thanks for that. And yes, I think that I'm reminded of this. There's differences in Europe, and some countries are heavy on making rules and regulating everything. Some countries have lots of rules and then they get around them. And some countries actually experiment with not making the rule but saying, as long as you're responsible people and we know where you are, you can have a bit of freedom to try things out, and then we'll make a rule because you'll give us the input, what the rule needs to be.
But what I meant is it was not about making rules, but actually being having the possibility from the very start to work together and thinking about the innovation together. That was more about that than rather making rules and imposing rules from the very start. And it's normal that actually we don't have solutions, and we do not want to have the regulation on everything from the start, but working hand in hand let's say in a collaborative manner. That was the idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, you're second, please.
Very quick on the second hurdle is and this is something which is related again with the overall, let's say, evaluation of how we can improve things. And this passes by measuring the burden of rare diseases. And this is something that, again, I think more collaboration is needed. So I just wanted to mention here that we have more and more, but I think, again, we need to go further in terms of integrating social sciences, humanities, and economics in the work around the rare diseases to be able to, in a way, evaluate better also how can we improve, let's say, the patient's pathways and the healthcare and research. And this is something that still needs further work.
So I'm sure Simona is very much in agreement with this, that right. Rare diseases are not about the hospital or the disease, they're about your whole life and the impact on everything. And that, I think you said, needs a lot more attention and perhaps a lot more data and research, so we can take appropriate measures that are not necessarily about genomic surgery, but they might be about other things that are a little closer to home.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, we have about we're halfway, and we have about 25 minutes for the audience. So I invite every one of you to get up and make a statement, ask a question, but do not spend more than a minute. Nicolene, please.
I'm a medical doctor and I'm chairing or coordinating one of the ERNs. And it has been said, and I think so, that ERNs has been instrumental for Solve-RD. And my question to you is, what do you think is an important step for the ERNs now, which is a community of experts and patients making policies and doing research, teaching and advising patients? What's an important step for the ERNs now?
So why are you asking, Nicolene? Because you're running an ERN, so I'm sure you have lots of ideas. Are you asking anyone in particular?
No, but I see it's a privilege to hear you speak on a higher level that we are used to do in clinics. So I'd really like to know, from your point of view, as from different parts of the universe, from different parts in patient care or policymakers, do you have an idea what would be, in your perspective, an important step for the ERNs to take now?
Right. Before we're going to ask the panel to answer your question, because that was a very clear question. But still, what do you think defines an ERN today? Because you run one.
The definition is that it's a bunch of people, a lot of energy, almost feeling like family.
Yes.
So what you told about what makes you tick, Milan, is a lot of energy because we want to reach goals. We want to make the world a little better, specifically patients with rare diseases. That's an ERN. Exactly. However, it's also policies, it's also monitoring, it's also evaluation, it's also the regular things in life. So we have a limited amount of energy, we have a very limited amount of money, and I would really like to hear some direction.
Okay, who would like to speak on this topic?
From my perspective, what I think I see the relevant role of ERNs, okay? Not as much as it could be exploited and developed. And I hope also for the diagnosis, but not only because we said it's important to link diagnosis pathway, diagnostic pathway to the healthcare at national level. So I think and I hope that more funding will come, and the joint action and integration of ERNs in the national health system could be a push. And in this sense, to have a major recognition of, and in all sense of what ERN could be and could play, it could be so essential in advancing from a research, clinical, healthcare point of view.
So what I think you're saying
Addressing
is that
Patients.
the ERNs now, and I think Nicoline's saying that too, the ERNs now are projects. There's a bunch of people
Still,
pursuing goals, and you say, I think, that this is the time to think about integrating ERNs in the overall health structure of our healthcare systems.
mhm,
Is that correct?
yes.
That was correct again. Now, I will say something about Nicoline's ERN, which is Genturis, that one thing they did early on was to start having courses. And the courses are targeting all of Europe, and this is where other people from other countries come and pick up on the knowledge and become part of the ERN. And I think that's something you did really well. And I think that's another thing you would want to continue, right? That's a goal you see. Okay, Milan.
Well, Nicoline, very, very good point. What I also meant in my introductory statement, we should make ERNs more attractive for our younger colleagues. They should really become their home base. It's not only just a project where they see overworked PIs and people who work on the weekends and so on and struggle with regulators without any funding. I mean, it's discouraging and I understand them. So, I mean, making them attractive, making them a home base and making the place where they can build their careers efficiently around holistic care for rare diseases and to pick up certain domains within which they can excel, because it's all about excellence, it's all about job security and so on. And this is where, Nicoline, I think we have a lot of reserves to be filled in.
Thank you. I'm going to ask our informal panel member on the right here. You have ideas about this?
Yeah, I have a known idea, but I also have a question actually from the online participants. So I'm going to answer first your question. So I think the next step for ERNs actually is to get to more standardized activities. So we've seen that ERNs have been set up in a very heterogeneous manner, and I think to make it a brand with more homogeneous activities where anybody knows what they do and not just have to look very deeply into every ERN to figure out what the hell they do. I think that's the next step. And if you hear ERN and know exactly what they provide and what value they actually produce.
So do you have ideas of what these core activities should be? Or obviously it would not be for you to decide, but it would be for the ERNs to get together and make a proposal. But still, for the sake of this discussion, what do you think the core activities of the ERN should be?
Yeah, maybe two. So the first, I'm really relating to what we discussed as regards diagnosis. It's really about standardizing diagnostic pathways and how diagnosis is being done in Europe.
Okay.
And second, training. Yeah, definitely.
Twinning?
Training.
Sorry.
Yep.
I misheard. I thought you said twinning, which is an interesting concept.
On, by the way.
Training, yes. So the thing we were discussing. Thank you. All right.
I'm Antonio Tavares. I work for ERN Euro NMD. I'm a clinical advisor for that ERN. And I appreciate the time and the comments of everyone around ways to improve their functioning. I think, however, there are in this case low-hanging fruits that we could start with. And obviously one is obvious and is already on the pipeline. That is the intention to have a formal integration of the RN in the national health systems, because currently the RNs are a bit like the clouds. They don't have a structure, they don't have a legal entity, and no one is basically obliged to look at them. And we started by some generous funding from the European Union, but the countries, the member states, have still a very fine and very anecdotal connection with ERNs. So we have one member state representative per country, trying to liaise all that we do towards the country-wide system, which I think it's probably not enough. And we need to have a better interaction and articulation with the member states. The other thing that I think would improve very much ERN, and it will improve everything that you talked about, healthcare, research, articulation, consideration for patients' rights and willingness to participate in research and share, is to create a real functioning ethical and legal framework. Because currently, even when we have centralized decisions, and I'm remembering, for instance, CPMS, the clinical patient management system, that is a software that enables cross-border discussions between clinicians. Even that system that was approved centrally is not universally accepted by all countries. As you know, Norway, part of EEA, doesn't allow clinicians to use it. So we need to start being able to put our national differences aside and create a real framework that doesn't work just in Germany, in Czech Republic, but it works Europe-wide, and the same for the ethical framework. And
thank you. Yeah, I think that's very recognizable. I think when you say we should put our national differences aside and come together, that kind of defines the EU, doesn't it? I think the thing that came in my head when you said we need to think about integrating, and other people have said this. So the one thing that happened, was it 10 years ago? There was this, was it a directive that said every country needs a rare disease plan? And what we saw, I think, was that all countries did this a bit differently. Some countries really did a lot of work and came up with really well designed plans, and others did perhaps a bit less. But even so, this directive to say you have to have a plan, I think it had made a major push in the right direction. Didn't solve the problem at all, but it kind of put things on the agenda. So perhaps we need something similar now in this direction of this integration with the healthcare system, and whether that's another rare disease plan, or you probably need to give it another name, but perhaps that's would be a way forward. Holm, yeah.
Yeah, perhaps I can comment on that briefly. So it's not a plan underway, but there is a project, or let's say an initiative, in which the health ministries of the different European member states will collaborate exactly on that topic. So integration of the European reference networks into the national healthcare system. So it's underway.
Does it have a name?
Yeah, it's Jardin.
Excuse me?
Jardin. Jardin.
Jardin.
Jardin.
Jardin.
Like in garden.
Jardin.
Like
As in
garden.
garden. Okay,
Garden
Jardin.
French.
Right.
For those of you who are German, Jardin.
Exactly. So, and there are a number of topics being defined which are important for integration of the ERNs, and which will be worked on during, I think, 3 years now then. And I hope that will develop at least a political framework for the integration.
Okay, why have we not heard of Jardin?
Because it's not.
Is it a secret?
It's not a secret at all. I think many in the room have heard about it.
Oh, it's just me who
It's
hasn't.
rather on the maybe it's just on the policy level. It's not on the actually clinical and scientific level.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Christina?
Thank you. Again, I would like to reiterate the fantastic opportunities of the ERNs as a structure, And particularly, I found it the part that rare disease community, they are working in common medical domains, which means grouping the diseases and co-developing different clinical outcomes or learn from each other is very important. Now, I see also the example of Solve-RD shows that ERNs they have started established in 2017, but they grow. They grow. It's their time that they are still growing, but also the research angle and how important is to go to the healthcare. It is evident with the collaborations of the ERNs, which are instrumental in projects like Solve-RD. So, and it will be a low-hanging fruit could be how we can take the results of the research and integrate it in the clinical research guidelines, in the clinical guidelines that the ERNs are developing, which is part of the mandate in order to have this equity, a broader knowledge to the patients community. Of course, what Holm you mentioned, it is happening. The next step, just to integrate the ERNs in the healthcare systems, will probably bring even best practices and knowledge more integrated across Europe. And also, I think also the potential for clinical research, and that's what that is growing. And we see more European reference networks, partners coming into the research and innovation applications, also on therapies, on registries, and on therapies. And I think the ERN registries also, in terms of data, it's a very important tool. And I think we could aim in the future to have high holistic next generation of registries, which they can integrate the natural history of diseases, but at the same time enriched all the data that comes from research, enriched and being accessible, of course. And the European Union that we are trying to, you have heard about the European health data space and the developments to make accessible the real world data, including health clinical data, to the research community. So there are a lot of important initiatives, and the community yourselves are contributing very importantly to that. And there is a lot of positive.
There's a lot of movement. Thank you, Christina. We're going to go to Holm. Sorry, Holm.
Hans Lockmüller from Ottawa.
Hans.
Yeah, I have two quick comments. I try to stay within the minute. So first comment is obviously these new therapies, they're fantastic and exciting, but they really only work, especially for childhood genetic disorders, if they are applied really early. We've seen this in Tim's examples very clearly. So that makes a clear case for cutting down the diagnostic delay and for early diagnosis. In some conditions like SMA, this may actually require newborn screening to be early enough. For other diseases, maybe not as drastic, but while we can sort of turn around genomes now in 48 hours, the reality is even for a common or the more common of the rare diseases, it takes years for a diagnosis, right? So there's lots of opportunities to cut down this diagnostic delay. So that's my first point, and I think I would like to see more of that in the next iteration of Solve-RD, whatever it is. Second comment is one of the main achievements, as was pointed out by several people, is this sort of two-level review system that so hugely helped with the reanalysis, the DATFs and the DITFs. And what this is in principle is actually bringing the bioinformaticians and the clinicians together and talking to each other, even so they basically speak different languages. And I think that's one of the main achievements. And I think I would like to see this even more going into education of clinicians, for instance, or guidelines, as we just heard. But sort of that element was a real game changer. And I wasn't sure at the beginning of the project whether this would be working with the ERNs just setting up, etc. But it worked beautifully. So congratulations for that.
I think that's congratulations to everyone in the project. Yes, Anna.
Yeah, I want to come back to what you, as kindly shyly said about a European plan for rare diseases. I don't think that we need to be shy and to call that a plan, because that was the volunteer, the willingness of 21 member states
that is a lot of people, and that has weight as a voice. And I think that European Commission should understand that, because what we are facing as a risk is that, of course, we need national integration of ERNs. We need to demonstrate at the national level the added value to have centers that are participating to an European thing, that are ERNs, and that are doing more things that what they were supposed to do at the beginning. That was healthcare. They are doing, and they are the perfect place to make this what we are discussing from, so overall the meeting, that is bridging research and healthcare in both sense. So I think that, of course, national integration is key, but if we lose the European willingness and the strong European, let's say, word that rare diseases are a priority at the European level, the European Commission, I'm sorry to say, will be sending a very bad message to the member states, saying, you should take care of that, should be integrated, but it is not a priority for us. And member states have also other priorities. So we are facing the risk to lose the priority even at the national level. So we need to have both the national integration and the strong European
Added value.
added value, no,
Yes.
but no, a plan. So a strong European policy with funding that is really making sure that this integration will happen without losing the cross-national added value that is the most important thing for rare diseases. Because
Let me try and tease these two apart. I think because I think you might be alluding to two different things here. So the thing that we want, I think people want integrated, is the things that have been developed, for instance, here, and they should now become part of the healthcare structure of the countries. Things like diagnosis, things like, the stuff we've been doing. The other thing that you're advocating should not be forgotten, perhaps, is the next step, which is about doing these things that we're not doing today, and that we heard about, where people are sort of pioneering and trying things out. So maybe, and that could be a focus then for this continued push to say, look, we're not done, on a European scale. It's not finished, it's not done. We have this to do.
And
Do
also,
you agree with that assessment?
yeah, and also, if I may, not losing the momentum, because
Yes.
now we are arriving at maturity of lots of things,
Yes.
of ERNs, of the Solve-RD brought a lot of maturity to this
Exactly.
diagnosed field.
So it's a conveyor belt.
Sure.
There's things that have now been done and they need to be integrated. And then there's new things
Continue
that need to be
done
started,
at
and they
European
should be
level.
part of the next plan.
Yeah, we need to have, otherwise we will be walking on just one leg. Huh?
Okay, any comments? Yes, there's lots of comments here. We'll start with Daria and then we'll have Simona.
I mean, I'm not going to necessarily comment on the European plan. I fully agree. And I think that, as Anna mentioned, we have a momentum. What I just wanted to mention is that these opportunities that we have today, and I mentioned, and I said that I'm going to say just a few words about the Rare Diseases Partnership, and why I wanted to also to say that, because I think that it gives a little bit of additional ground to labor for the ERNs, but also for the other organizations or institutions. There is the possibility, I mean, of the funding. There are funding opportunities. There are education programs to construct together. And most importantly, there is the clinical research network that encompasses also the diagnostic part that should be taken from the experience of the Solve-RD. So I think that there are a lot of opportunities there, and honestly, we hope that the expertise that we have within the ERNs, but also other let's say national and European organizations, that it can be taken up for the for the benefit of making also the rare diseases clinical trial ready, faster diagnosis and so on. One thing I just wanted to mention, because, and it's a goal, and I need to say that I just, that it's been 2 years that we are working on this. We organize many national meetings to try to engage to maximum the national community. And now we are in the process of collecting the letters of intent from the different organizations and countries. There are some countries where it works very well and we already received feedback, but I just received an email, for example, that's why I wanted to say that here, that, for example, Slovenia says we do not have any organizations that are interested to join Rare Diseases Partnership. And I was shocked to see that, especially when seeing also the results and so on. So maybe the information is actually not going from the higher level to the ones who are actually doing the work. And I just wanted to call for, if you do not have the information about the Rare Diseases Partnership at your national level, don't hesitate to come back to us, because maybe we do not want to miss the opportunity for every country.
And you're inviting this group.
To
Right?
help.
We've said, we're now a community. We work together, and you say, make that voice heard,
Okay.
participate.
Yeah.
Yes, Simona,
I want
and then Christina. And then unfortunately, we'll have to stop because people need to catch planes and buses and cars and trains. Yes.
just quickly to comment on the plan as Anna was presenting, and she's completely right. This is why, as patient representatives, Eurordis and national alliances, we are pushing, because it's really a burning need to have, again, as you mentioned, it was a very long time ago, 2009, a framework, a European scenario, just setting the scenario for coherent strategy on different aspects, which go from the diagnostic to the integration of ERN, to the clinical pathways. And this is the European Action Plan. And we need to have this set again. Doesn't mean that it's all at European level. Didn't happen. It happened the opposite. So it's a sort of indication, recommendation. We were talking about recommendation at that time to member states, because there's a need, but to develop strategies in a coherent way. So we have been working with the foresight study, the RARE 2030. So recommendations are there. And the European Action Plan is very much needed to gather all this input that we already received from our community. They are ready, they are there, but we need the European level to set up the scenario and then having this member states.
But then it also needs, as people have said, continued energy from this group.
Yes.
As well. I don't think, Milan, I'm sorry, we'll go to Christina and then we'll go into, maybe Tim.
I mean, we hear you so very carefully, all the discussions at this very advanced thinking community, and also the needs of the different stakeholders. What I wouldn't agree completely with the statement that rare disease, the Commission stated that rare disease is not a priority. I mean, on the contrary, at the European Union level, at the Horizon Europe Research and Innovation Framework, we have called for partnerships with the member states and the community, research community at large, for areas which are considered priority. So partnerships are not happening in all the areas. And something else that we are working together with the member states and representatives, Daria also as a coordinator of the European Joint Program on Rare Disease, and we have always said that these partnerships should build on the good practices that have already taken place and upscale. So the idea that there is a clinical research network, capacity building training, and the fact that we have put also as an action line the diagnostic platform or diagnostic translational platform, it's evident that we built on the results such as Solve-RD. And something else, we have had a dialogue with the member states since April 2021, And at the beginning, the budget that we had for the partnership was at least 100 million. Now, the latest news in December, it is up to 150 million because of the necessity and the needs, but this will be matched with the member states. So it's kind of a important endeavor, okay? So,
Wonderful.
I just saw one element that it is still priorities.
Thank you. Well, what we'll do now is I'll ask Tim.
Tim.
Tim, please. So having heard, this very European discussion,
Yeah. A little bit left out.
would you care to share an American perspective? Perhaps a lot of things are recognizable. Perhaps some things are different, and you don't have to. You've given your talk, so you can be brief if you want to, or whatever comes in your head.
I'll be very brief, but it's actually a wonderful cultural whiplash to come see this effort. I overstate it slightly. There is an analogous program in the United States funded by the NIH, the Undiagnosed Disease Network, which has just graduated from its period of research funding. It had extended funding now through an act by Biden to continue. But many of these conversations are happening between member institutions that parallel the conversations that I hear going on here. I've had the privilege of being involved in that from the beginning, and it's wonderful to see. I think that there's a level of urgency and a level of commitment to each member state's citizenry and rare disease population that actually gives your effort a special flavor. I just wanted to congratulate everyone on that, because sometimes it's hard to orchestrate these events in the United States, even with the NIH and competing academic institutions. So that's all I'll say. But thank you.
Well, thank you for that. And because we're running over time and people have made plans. So thanks to everyone. Is it for me to close? It is for me to close. I'm going to close the meeting. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for staying. Thanks for keeping the energy. Even this last session, I felt there was a lot of commitment, a lot of enthusiasm. I think we've been here to celebrate the Solve-RD project. This is its final meeting. I think we're now part of an ecosystem, which I think we were not as much 5 years ago. I think if we can take some of that forward, then there will be endless opportunities to do, fantastic new stuff for people with rare diseases and take things forward and do innovative diagnosis, treatment, education, all the things we've been discussing. Thanks very much for your really active involvement throughout these days. Thank you, everyone, for your active involvement throughout the project. We'll not meet again in this context, but I'm sure we'll meet again in another format, and I hope to see every one of you there. So bye-bye. And it was set to yesterday, another applause for the organizers of this meeting here locally. Yes.